Assalamualaikum guys, it has been 588 days ever since Arman Tsarukyan's last fight against Charles Oliveira, which happened at UFC 300, and a lot of people are talking shit about Arman, saying that like obviously like Dan Hooker has a huge chance of winning in this fight just because of how inactive Arman has been and also how good Dan has been. Dan has proved in his recent fights, but in this video I will break down to you guys why why this fight for Arman is basically a guaranteed win and why Dan Hooker actually does not stand a chance. So first of all, Arman, during this period of time, Arman had actually been officially scheduled for a fight against Islam Makhachev for the UFC lightweight title, right? It was at UFC 311, but Arman obviously pulled out due to him not making the correct weight for like the championship weight. And to be honest, it was actually a very sad time for all of us because Islam versus Arman, that was obviously most of us including me predicted Islam to destroy him, but still it was a very highly intriguing fight just because of how well rounded Arman is compared to most other top level top level lightweights which Islam actually fought. So with that being said, after pulling out of UFC 311 for such a dumb reason and for being so stupid, Arman Tsarukyan, like what he did afterwards, and like for basically like ever since then until this fight that we are breaking down was announced, is completely stupid from Arman Tsarukyan. He has been such like he is, to be honest, like this is the type of behavior, this is the worst type of behavior from any fighter in the UFC. Because Arman, like he had a lot of potential. Like he was offered to fight a lot of guys during this period of time, before the Hooker fight was announced. But the thing is, he did not accept any of that. He wanted to fight fight for the belt instantly. Like after he did not make weight, he did not want to like earn his title shot again. He just decided to wait out, and he thought that he would get the title shot after Ilya Charles in UFC 317. But little did he know that the UFC did not favor this, like this type of behavior one way, and rightfully so in my opinion, because the UFC made him wait for for until he fights a top contender like Dan Hooker. And like, to be honest, I'm really glad that we actually have like the fighter who he is actually fighting is someone like Dan Hooker, like someone who is as dangerous as Dan. Though I feel like it won't be close. Now on the other hand, we have Dan Hooker, right? This guy, he has been very active recently. He was scheduled to fight Justin Gaethje in the in the first few months of this year, but obviously pulled out, and was later replaced by Rafael Fiziev. So right now I feel like Dan Hooker, to be honest, like Dan Hooker fighting Arman, it's actually a gifted fight for Dan in my opinion, because he does not really deserve this. Like, yeah, he is a top contender, yeah, he's a very dangerous guy, but still you have to understand that Arman is basically the number one contender, but he does not deserve to fight for the title just because of having such a high ego basically. But when it comes to the fight, I feel like it's a 5 rounder, so I feel like Arman Tsarukyan will definitely submit him and won't have that hard of a time doing it, because you have to understand that Dan Hooker, he is a primary striker, and Arman Tsarukyan obviously is a very dangerous wrestler. Like Arman Tsarukyan is a primary wrestler, right? Like, he has good hands. He showed that against Charles, but Charles Oliveira, who was still on fire during that time, right? Like he was still continuing his streak, like because I believe he was coming off of a submission against I believe it was Benel Dariush, and like it wasn't like we expected Charles to submit Arman easy, but Arman showed his ground defense, and he showed his ground game, and he won the fight fair and square. Though it was a complicated decision because a lot of people scored it. I believe it was like 29-28 for Charles Oliveira. Anyways, the main reason, as I said, is I believe like Dan will try his best to keep the fight on the feet, but even that way I feel like Arman's boxing at this point is much better than compared to someone like Dan Hooker's. Like Arman's boxing was very crisp against Charles Oliveira, though as I said that fight happened like 588 days ago at this point. So it's the fight, in my opinion, is very confusing to understand. But if you really, like take a look at the stats and everything realistically, I feel like Arman easily submits Danuka, and if it goes to distance, it's definitely an Arman domination. So Dan basically has zero chance of winning. anyways, that's what's on, guys. You guys, which number you guys think? Shall see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.